In this video, I want to introduce you to the concept of the content provider. So what in the heck is a content provider? Well, if you're an Android developer, you may know what this is. If you're an iOS developer only, you probably don't know what it is. So I'm going to show you a little bit about it. So this is the application that this video is based upon. And you can see there's some content here that I'm displaying. And what I do is all of this content is made available to the application via this thing called the content provider. So we have champions and then we have skins, and these are the skins. And all of this information, the images and the data about them, are all content for this application. So your applications have their own sorts of content, maybe being derived from all sorts of sources, different web services, etc. And the content provider is a way to manipulate the data and also query the data for your application. One of the tenets of mobile application development is that you should persist early and you should persist often. What you want is for your application to be functional even when there's no network connectivity. Like if they're in airplane mode or they lose connectivity for whatever reason, you still want your application to function. So that's what this application does. That's what applications like Facebook do. If you're using Facebook on a plane or something, you still are able to see content, and you're able to potentially like content and comment, but it won't sync those changes until you have connectivity. So something like the content provider makes this all possible. There's a couple of concepts that you need to understand in order to effectively use the content provider. To remind you, everything in the application is stored locally in a SQLite database. And so everything in here is identified via a URI, or a Universal Resource Identifier, which is similar to a URL, which you should be familiar with. So this list of champions is identified by a URI. Each individual champion is identified by a unique URI. The list of skins for a champion has its own URI, as does each skin. So URI is a core concept that you will use to identify content in your application. The second thing is, of course, the content provider. And it is the thing in your application that actually allows you to get content to display or manipulate content. You may need to change things or update or delete or insert new things. The content provider makes this possible. And typically, a content provider is registered with the application, and so that the application knows which provider to use to manipulate or access a specific set of content, because you can have more than one content provider. The next thing I want to introduce you to is something called the content observer. So if something in the background occurs that updates or deletes or inserts or whatever, makes some sort of change to your content, you need to have the concept of an observer. So this UI, for example, if it's updating champions in the background and it inserts some new champions that became available with a new release of the game, the UI needs to know when the content has changed so that it can refresh it. So these three concepts are key in understanding the whole mechanism for interacting with content in your application. And in some other videos, I'm going to go into each one individually.